Okay, so we're back on the FY 2025 budget, and we are going through some scintillating sections. First is a one-time list. Is that what you're giving us?
To start with, I was actually going to start with
Ignore what they did.
the C section pieces.
What?
I was going to start with the C section pieces.
Fine.
So and I've got to. I figured I can do this in 15 minutes. Then I got to run and get my kid, and then I'll be back. But
What are you doing with it?
well, the baby had to go home early, so Dad's home with the baby. So then I got to go get the 4-year-old, and then drop the 4-year-old at home.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Memories.
Luckily, it's only 2 miles down the road, so it's quick. I only live a mile that way, so it's quick. Yeah.
All right.
All right, so this is real quick before we sort of dive into some of the details around the C and D sections, and you'll see this. I wanted to go through this quick spreadsheet before we go through the C section, and I should say for the record, Emily Burke, fiscal office.
We live yet? Yes, we are live.
Okay. There were changes in the C section, you'll recall, is changes to the FY 2024 budget. So the C section of the budget always includes changes to the current year. So the House passed version, there's some changes to 24.
That starts on page 101 of the big bill.
Yep. And there's a couple of changes. So one of the part of the governor's recommend, and then the House version of the budget is they are both are relying on one-time money generated in FY 24 that falls to the bottom line and then is carried forward into FY 25 to balance the budget. And to fund some one-time investments, mostly one-time investments in FY 25. And so the Budget Adjustment Act passed and didn't include all of the recommended changes to FY 24 that the governor had put forward in his budget. So I think there was desire to have additional conversations about some of those pieces. So the House had some of those conversations. They incorporated pieces into the FY 25 budget, and this is just sort of overall summary. Before you do anything in 25, you gotta get 24 kind of figured out, how much is on the bottom line in 24, and then that is available revenue in 25 for your budget. So the first line on here, the BAA as passed. So at the end, after the budget adjustment was passed, there was $35.29 million on the bottom line available in FY 25. What the governor recommended and the House accepted was to reduce the funding available for childcare subsidies. There was $50 million added in FY 24 to support the expansion of childcare subsidies through Act 76. The take-up hasn't really been there in FY 24. There's sort of some startup going. This is one-time reduction. So there'd be a $10 million reduction.
Is this I know there's a $9 million CC reduction.
It's the same thing, it's just in 2 different fiscal years. So there's 10 million in FY 24 and then 9 million in FY 25.
Well, one's based on a projection in 25 that there might be less uptake. This is actual.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll keep going.
Yeah, so
We've got
first,
2 things that's not dealing with 24 before we get to 25.
Yeah. So there's the 10 million from the CCFAP, and then there's an additional reversion. There's a one-time appropriation to AHS in Act 78, which is the FY 24 budget, the 1100 L3, which there's $10 million set aside in the language around it, says sort of like COVID, additional COVID impacts, something to that effect. So the House proposed to take 560 of that $10 million, give it to the AHS central office, and then match it with federal funds and use that $560,000 to fund non-emergency medical transport in FY 24. And the total gross number, which I should have written down, but I didn't, is $1.3 million in global commitment funds. So there's those 2 sort of sources, additional sources in the budget adjustment. Then there's a couple of spending things that also happen in 24. So you'll recall there's the summer EBT program. There is IT investments that are necessary, and I believe it's at a 50 state federal match. So there's a $500,000 that's appropriated in FY 24 for the summer EBT program. Then you see the reversion up above the 5.6, and then you see the appropriation of the non-emergency medical transport, that's just an in and out. And then there was also in Act 84,
Yeah,
which
you know
is,
that, which we think, based on decisions, really very little would be used and could be available for the elections.
yes. But to the extent it's appropriated, we carry it here, so there's an additional $1.56 million of spending, which leaves $44.29 million on the bottom line projected in FY 24 that will carry forward into FY 25 for appropriation.
That's a good question.
Yes, go ahead.
When would you change that? For example, the school budget rebooks, would you change the bottom line at a point?
No,
Finalize the budget or not till next
no,
fiscal year?
actually, there's language to combine it with some additional to the secretary, it went to the Secretary of State, so it stayed there, and then there's language that would say anything that's not utilized would be available to apply to supporting elections. I'm just doing this from memory.
Yeah, I remember
Yes.
that.
They wanted 800,000, and this is, we think,
So-
that most of this would be available for that purpose.
Right.
And if the two things in the budget don't quite cover it, then they can come in and ask for a budget adjustment. Other questions on that? All right, so this is sort of how much money we have to start out, building the FY 25 budget.
So then I can start walking through page 101 of the big bill, page 83. Starting on 101, you see section C100. So that's that first number, that $10 million reduction is a change to DCF child development appropriation, reducing 10 million from grants and from general fund.
Which page was this?
101.
101.
101.
Thank you.
So you're,
These are 24 adjustments, appropriations and stuff.
Mhm.
All right,
Then
keep going here.
Yep. And then similarly in C101 is the appropriation in O subpart 13 is where we add the appropriation for the summer EBT spending.
And that was originally in the PAA request, but we pulled it out, I guess.
I'm gonna bring Grady up with me because he's gonna help with some of these.
Grady Nixon, Joint Fiscal Office. The next one is section C 102. This was included in the GovRec language. This is to allow Secretary of Human Services to include a waiver request for home and community-based services, conflict of interest requirements, and to seek approval for FMAP funds to be used for certain room and board payments. Section C 103.
Here, need to make sure people don't have any question. We originally had thought that the nutrition programs would also be part of this room and board payments, but is that addressed in a different place?
Yes, so section C 103 is where you'll see the agency requested that they're in the process of requesting this as an investment rather than an amendment to the waiver.
So, okay, so this is, and, I don't know whether you want to have discussion with the health and welfare, but certainly our bring ourselves into compliance with the conflict-free case management, has been kicked down the road. It's about as long as we can. We've had communications from the, Disabilities Council, concerned about it, but it does probably add some cost, because what it's doing is separating out, the assessment and determination of the level of services from the provider of the service. That's to avoid any conflict that I prescribe it and I deliver it. They need to get waiver authority to comply with the federal regulation. I don't know if you've had any discussion on that, but obviously this is something they think they need, and I'm not gonna get into the weeds on it, but it's kind of interesting. language, so, we'll keep it as is unless there's some reason to change it, but I'm assuming it's necessary, particularly around the room and board, and rental assistance. Something that would be very helpful, anything to do with housing. So let's go to 103.
So one of the three is where you'll see House added language directing the Secretary of Human Services to request approval for home delivered meals to be a global commitment investment.
So that's the $1 million that they're trying to match.
Well, it would be probably the entire appropriation. I don't know. A million is being added, but I don't know what the total
I
is.
think the matching, did we see the matching was $1 million?
Yes.
And that's what they were putting up was a million.
What is our total appropriation for nutrition for both home delivered? I guess this is home delivered meals. It's not just
Right, it's Meals on,
only Meals on Wheels. It's not meal sites.
Yeah. it's going to Meals on
And
Wheels.
do we have a specific amount for Meals on Wheels itself as opposed to senior nutrition, which would include the meal sites?
I don't know. And Mike, the other question I had about this is, you know, and Stephanie, I think, has worked on it. How sure is she of getting it? And is this, is $1 million all we can put into it, or could we put more into this?
We could probably put a lot more in it, but whether we have anything to put in it, it's gonna
Well,
be our next discussion.
That would be the next discussion, but you know, if you're comparing this to you know, the food bank or whatever you're choosing to compare it to. If you're getting a match and you're getting my Meals on Wheels site with private donations can do something for $4.50 a pop, it makes this a lot more advantageous to put money here if you do have it.
Assuming you get the waiver. And
Assuming you get the way.
which we don't know. So, do we, I guess that's a question I would like to know, how much we, if we're able to identify out of our senior nutrition, appropriation, how much are we talking about would go to support Meals on Wheels or be subject to this waiver? Okay, let's keep going on that, and we'll, hearings.
Section C 104, this is from the GovRec. This includes the Department of Health's Women, Infant, and Children's Program in this statutory language that allows, and then makes the technical correction to individual rather than his or her for hearing requests from the Human Services Board.
Is it adding WIC that wasn't there before?
So it adds the department, yeah, it adds WIC into it, and then the rest is just technical correction of individual rather than his or her.
All right, that seems to be a technical. Okay, close out. Some of it's just individuals versus his or her and adding the WIC program as a decision being subject to field diseases service support. All right?
Great. I'll do this last, you 105, and then I'm gonna duck out for a little bit.
Yeah, you should.
But this one just adds, clarifying language, if you'll recall, there's the pension plus payment for the state employees.
I do recall that.
Do you recall? And you'll recall that the governor did not include it in
I do
the
recall.
original budget, so this changes language to say that this shall be included going forward, in the budget.
Let me ask, when we passed the pension reform bill, and we had all this in it, it's this language, are we duplicating language that we already have in statute? I don't need to answer that question now, but I don't know when we made that commitment the plus was all part of that other bill, that we've passed. The governor vetoed it, and it's the only bill that I'm aware of that passed both houses. The veto vote was unanimous. Not to sustain the governor's veto. So just look at it, Chris. You don't need the answer.
Madam Chair, I'm very familiar with this language.
I know you are.
Happy to weigh in whenever the committee wants.
So what's the answer?
So the answer to your question is, this is not duplicative. This was language that related to a reporting requirement that was put in last year's budget, where I think it was the legislature's hope that the plus would be paid through the payroll rate. Turns out due to some OMB guidance that we can't do that. So, this language would modify that reporting requirement and maintain the core of it.
It just says in each applicable year thereafter.
Correct, and then there was an additional section, subsection B that needed to be stricken out. So this report will just focus on what breakdown of the rate is attributed to pension versus OPEB. The plus would be funded separately. Rather than for the
Operation
rate.
directive.
Correct.
What?
And there is, in the administration's technical letter, the subpart B that Chris just referred to, there is a recommendation from the administration to strike subpart B because the federal funding requirement doesn't work with OMB guidance, so this.
I don't see,
The strikeout of
I don't
subpart B was meant to be included in the House version of the bill, but does not appear
oh, I was
in it.
gonna say, I must be.
It was in the technical memo.
Huh?
It was in the technical memo, and yes, we concur that it should be
It should be added.
added. The strikeout should be added.
Yes.
Okay, all right, we should have removed it, all right. All right, so we don't. We're fine with in each applicable year thereafter. Appropriated,
And the administration also recommends in subpart A, eliminating of this act, because it becomes duplicative. If you're saying that it's in each applicable year thereafter.
oh, on page 4,
Yes.
okay, that's
Each,
104. Of this act to fund additional payments, so get rid of this act.
Of this act, and then add in subpart B so that you can get rid of it.
All right. Well, whatever those changes. And all the deletions here on, page top of 105.
Yes, that's all related to what I was describing, Madam Chair. This focuses the
Well, you need to
annual.
get yourself on record.
I'm sorry, for joint fiscal. This just reinforces that the reporting requirement is to show the breakout based on pension and OPEB and not the plus payments, since we can't bake that into the rate.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, we're optimistic, but our optimism was not.
Six is okay.
Yeah, on 106, this is just really technical cleanup. We are hoping that we could, get funding for the, our pension plan but we can't because of cost allocation limitations and stuff. We were hopeful, ever optimistic. So this is just getting rid of language that turned out to be, not possible to do based on federal requirements. Okay, so not C 107.
C 107, so the first change you'll see here is just cleanup of drafting, changing to calculate to for the purpose of calculating. And then this excludes transportation fund reversions.
Oh, yeah, so we're
from-
not paying, put statutory reserve, they're not making them subject to statute.
Right.
Okay.
Section C 108 makes the central garage transfer $0 for FY 24.
Well, you have a central garage.
It's really like an internal service fund and it's billed back out to the different, programmatic areas of the county.
or accepting donations, if you want to give.
You could give $1 here.
Well, as long as we're not stealing from the fund, so they replace food. That's a no-no.
What?
As long as you're not stealing, so they don't replace the fleet, that's a no-no.
Well, that's true, and that has been our concern about this. But maybe the chair now, are you officially the chair?
No.
Well, maybe the vice chair. But this is reflective of what's in the T-bill.
Yeah, I'm just,
And
I'm only raising.
you're just saying, I know what you're saying, and just like they used all 25 million of the set aside for the IIJ match in 1 year, next year, this T-bill is gonna be more challenging, yes. So,
I've been there.
C-109, yes, we've all been there. We've all been there when the state police cars were held together with bungee cords and linking gap tanks.
C-109 allows DHCE to use up to 5% of the $10 million one-time appropriation from last year's big bill for admin costs.
Oh, we didn't give them any money.
The authority wasn't in there.
No. All right, here's C-1110.
So C-110 allows the Secretary of Administration to reallocate up to 5 million federal funds appropriated through ERAB as approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee. And so this is in C sections because these reallocations already occurred.
Well, it's already been done.
Section C,
And I think we did that by joint this. We've done that sort of approved advance, then with the language to make it official.
similar to BGAP, I think it was in the data. Section C-111, so this is the non-emergency Medicaid transportation funding section that Emily discussed. The administration technical letter recommends just including this in section C-101 as it's also amended to the same section of last year's big bill. So this is the 560,000 general fund for the $1.311 million total.
So this is for fiscal year 24.
Yes.
So I don't think we have any problem moving it the other section. And then the question. It's, excuse me, 2, and that is. Would that go also into 24? Because we are doing an appropriation in 25. The non-emergency Medicaid transportation, this is all Medicaid. I'm just wondering about whether number 2 on new payment methodology, and part of the FY25 budget adjustment. If we're moving, I just don't, if that goes into 24, it seems like it's more related to 25. If you're talking about a 25 budget adjustment.
That you would think that it should not be added and that it should be its own separate section.
Well, or whatever we're doing in 25 budget relative to, funding of the Medicaid non-emergency transportation. I'm gonna hold number 2, for that reason and see if, in fact, we shouldn't be moving 25 and 26 into the 24, FY24 changes. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Chris, do you understand what I'm saying? Between the two of you, you can remember it for me. All right, here's C-112, and this is dealing with the, what we had talked about earlier, and the, in terms of the money to the Secretary of State.
Right.
For the committee's awareness, this is also addressed in the administration's technical letter. Not substantive changes, but just minor tweaks to the language to make sure that they can execute this.
Okay.
Section C113 is part of,
This larger discussion.
yes, so there are multiple sections of the bill
Yeah.
that address this, including C114.
Huh?
In C113.
So we're holding right now,
Okay,
113. And we're, also holding 114. Because we've already spent some of that money, the bill passed.
And we're holding 113 because we're not sure if we want to strike one. Is that the issue?
113, no,
What is it, dollar amount? Or-
no, it has to do with the whole opioid, abatement fund and how it's being used, and, it ties into, how we're using evidence-based money and payment for naloxone and needles, and that's
Just want to do it
something.
all together.
Yeah, it's all part of the package, so we'll just, keep that, open. Yeah, we'll hold that. And, 115,
C115, so this is pulling in, the changes that are in this year's capital bill. This is reducing FY24 appropriations out of the capital infrastructure
well, we need
sub-account.
to hold this till we finally get the capital bill, I think.
Yeah.
And so this is the House capital bill.
Okay. That is using general fund rather than bonding money. So committee, we passed a bill out on forensic facility. And we said, we're concerned about the date, but it's with intent. And so we were gonna put money into the capital bill. I talked to Senator Ingalls. But BGS says they can do the planning, just as part of their base funding activities. So I'm having language drafted though in the capital bill that makes it clear that the intent is this is the planning while that's being done out of the budget, that the next year's capital bill will include design. So I just wanted to let you know that I felt it was really important to articulate in the capital bill that, because the House had put in, you will consult with Dale to see about the population that could be served. Well, not that that didn't need to be done as part of planning, but more needed to be done based on our discussion to say, our intent is get this facility online. And, it's been too long as it is. So I just wanted to let you know, we're working on, I requested Damien and I consulted with Senator Ingalls, so to let you know, that, we'll be adding something that is much more, definitive about our intent to get this facility operation. And that would go in the capital bill. All right, so that was since we're capital, I just wanted to talk about that. So the capital bill goes all the way through to where?
The end of page 111. Section D100, so this is property transfer tax, allocation language, it's annual standard language. I would note for the committee, that part of this language was amended, in sub A to A, to reflect changes that were made in the House miscellaneous tax bill. There weren't substantive changes, the and in VHCB in 2 instances was not included. And the reference to 10 BSA 314 was not properly formatted. So, those were the only House changes to this section.
I just need to make sure that there's nothing here that would be impacted by what we might end up with recommendations from our council. But this is based on what is currently in place.
Right, so this is GovRec.
Yeah, and then we have to do the debt payments on the affordable bond, that's something that we had early on. So, we'll just have to keep this in mind here, but this is pretty standard allocation of the revenues from the property transfer tax as it's currently,
As it exists.
as currently.
These are the current percentages.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and you can see notwithstanding, we're still notwithstanding some of the transfer tax to the general fund. In excess of 22. What is the estimated revenue, for the property transfer tax? As it currently exists? I know there's been discussion about change,
We'll take more than 1 second.
24, 25.
25.
Are we over estimate?
I don't know.
It's what you're asking.
In FY 25, Madam Chair, is projected to bring in 58.1.
And does that look like? In
That's
this year?
your estimates.
Well, this year's forecast was 60.2.
Oh, so it's coming in less.
Yeah. Well, it
we
is
are
expected to be
A
lower,
little more,
year over year, and I can tell you where we are year to date in a second.
If we didn't have the notwithstanding, what would be the transfer to VHCB?
Yeah, we're essentially on target for the year. We're above forecast by $0.4 million.
So is it 50%? Is that what it is?
That's what the statutory.
Yeah,
50% of the transfer tax would be.
well, we're not too far off the 20, and 20, if this is 22.1 and, half of 50, 80. Still some, 7, about 7. 58 divided by 2. 29, about 7 million. That's what's being understood. Well, we'll just, we can keep that open. That, I guess, although that reduces the amount of the general fund, so, well, we always get asked to not have the notwithstanding language. So we can, if we ever thought we had the money, but as you can see, there are other places that money's going into housing outside of this general fund, so, this isn't as though we are ignoring housing. All right, 101 fund transfer, that's really exciting.
I'll pass out a document for the committee for both E101A and E101B.
Here's revolving loan fund for unsafe dams, $1 million.
That would. You know, Bill. Then
We do. It was 213.
That
Thank you.
we're gonna, that the issue here was positions for that.
position.
Well, they're really short within that division as reviewing.
Division.
Yeah,
Now that's had an appropriation with all 16 positions, of about 2.4 billion. The secretary has prioritized the work and the positions associated.
Yeah.
So,
I have a bill with 2.4 billion.
yeah, well, stand in line,
I'm more important than patients.
depends on if you're
That's to do with
flooded.
your public safety.
Well, if you're washed out, you're probably, and a dam collapses, I guess, depending on where you live, huh? All right, so.
we have 120 dams that haven't been reviewed for their safety. That are years behind.
You have 800 criminals out on release and nobody supervises.
I'm just
That's
saying,
pretty
a
dangerous.
little bit of everything is probably gonna need help.
We are not saying one is to the exclusion of the other, maybe. Depends on what you have on your wish list.
I wish.
Well, be like the man who didn't expect much for Christmas and he didn't get as much as he expected, Senator Sears.
Well,
So, all right, Grady, what do you want us to look at?
So,
A,
yeah,
101A?
D 101A, so these are the transfers.
Oh, I know, so we don't have to count that as, we're calculating our reserve. And we crossed the Rubicon on that, so, okay. Capital fund, the governor, this is why we wanted to keep jurisdiction over that general fund. And the House, reduced it by 4 million. They did include the money for the Salisbury Fish Hatchery, which was a priority for our Senate institutions, so it meant a difference of 3.5 over the governor's recommend, and that's what's reflected in the House passed institution capital.
What the meat cake.
And we're gonna go with it. Let them eat cake.
Yeah, that's what it says,
Yeah.
and you've got all kinds of other priorities.
I'm sure it's a big revenue. Don't you think it's an economic engine for the state, Senator Sears? I know. Don't you have Orbis in your district?
We do,
All right,
we have a fish hatchery.
yeah. So let's go on to tax modernization. That's just the standard language. Fire prevention and building inspection funds. Unsafe 911 fund. Anybody want to challenge any of these funds? As you can see, the only difference is really the amount of general fund that, the House thought should go to, capital expenditures in the capital bill. Criminal records check fund, we had a fund for that too? God, Act 250 permit fund. So these are transfers to the general fund, all right? Well, unless anybody's got any questions, we're gonna move on.
About the military army.
That's
armory fund.
the one we just purchased. In Waterbury.
The Andrew,
Well, they said they wanted to buy it, they could use it for anything.
Storage.
Why is there a fund?
So it's to the military, it's the sale of the Burlington Armory
Yeah.
and other, but the military is.
No, we're asking why these are all funds, special funds.
I don't believe that this one in particular is an armory fund. It's
I thought it was-
military related.
Why does it say Armory?
I didn't draft this document,
I don't know, I think maybe the language
I
is
think
just
that-
different.
for consistency, Emily put fund, but that's not reflected in the bill language. You'll see on page 114, this is just to military.
Yeah.
Labeled as sale of Burlington Armory and other, that's the 890. It's titled the Burlington, even though it's Waterbury. So there's neither a fund nor a Burlington reflected in this document as an armory fund and in the language as Burlington Armory.
Can Burlington declare control of it?
If they can set up.
You
an armory
already took over
quickly,
that airport south road. You take the armory to Waterbury.
We got our own military.
That ought to, and that ought to might need it.
under the mayor,
You just say that the transportation committee was recommending taking and making the Burlington Airport a regional
It has
airport,
discussed, yeah.
regional or?
a regional
Yeah.
airport.
It's
No, it's already
international.
International.
This is the.
Regional control.
But
Control.
regionally controlled.
How much chickens?
Oh, we-
No,
Well, people from Wilson do.
okay, turned out to be more complicated than it seems on the surface. But I'm gonna move on, even though we can look at, the term fund.
It's fun.
Or the word Burlington?
I assume transportation,
Yes, so,
trails downtown, that's, central garage. So
What's
Um,
regional trails?
It's the recreational trails fund. This is
Are you
the,
taking money away from my,
No, you're
Mill
not.
Valley Rail Trail?
No, this is from the transportation fund to the recreational trails fund.
this transfer happens every year according to statute.
Of course, they're taking away from you.
I'm just checking.
By formula?
At least it's not
It's in
that, you
statute
know,
by dollar.
we don't take money away from Bennington, so.
I think. This is just. Mechanical rather than anything very substantive or changing. I love Go Debt Service, I
Yeah, I've
think
heard.
general obligation.
Yes.
Okay. Education fund, tax modernization. That's money that goes, that's been part of the formula to support obviously, the collection of the statewide property tax is a major part of the
They ought
tax
to,
business.
they ought to be using that money instead of modernizing their computers, teaching kids how to read.
Well, I would think with the amount that we're spending per pupil, that, perhaps we need to look at, the curriculum and teaching methods, which is what the literacy bill is all about. So this is to help collect the money to support, hopefully, teaching our kids to read. Clean water fund, this is just, the movement that occurs, from the clean water fund to ag, for example, lakes in crisis, that's probably Lake Carmi still. I wonder how that's coming.
Well, it's not much.
Well, no, it's
Is
not.
that
Not a big,
120,000?
Yes.
it's mainly,
But there's only one link that's been officially declared, correct?
I don't think so.
Really?
I think it's just Lake Carmi.
Okay.
Okay, other sub-accounts,
Yeah, so this is the other, account in the cash fund.
yes. I
So this
know.
is where you'll see the release of the IIJA money.
Well, we were thinking we would release half and half, but the T-bill proposes using it all 1 year, so next year there is no set aside for the match. So we might have to go to TIF on the.
I think it's a good thing to have that.
Actually, that was one of the arguments why we should pay off the TIF bond.
Yep,
Because we might need it in the future.
The memories are short.
Any,
So transportation fund, yeah.
before you get there. All these funds, is there any effort that the judiciary's modernization fund or their, because their fund is $2 million in whole because they haven't gotten the fines that they expected for their modernization of their technology.
No, I don't think it
Higher
has anything.
election.
Nobody did anything with that in the transit.
There's no transfer
No, there's no transfer.
in this section, no.
They didn't get any money.
Well, because it probably wasn't set up that way. I mean,
Well, it's 2 million that I can't justify. But it's to spend in light of everything else they need. But their funds are less. Has anybody looked at that as one time?
that would have to go on the one-time list. These are just transfers that are really established in statute, or in prior legislation. And this seems to me it's something that's emerged as a funding need that they would like to have, considered.
Right,
It
sure.
sounds to me like it's almost a base. Well, no, it's not, because
They're,
this project
you
is,
have to stop sometime.
well, you'll have to put it on the one-time list.
Can we do that?
Yeah, you can, then we'll
Thank you.
decide how far we can go down it, but we'll add it to the list.
Thank you.
This is the 25,000 that we've already set aside, for the IIJ match, and then this general fund, I'm assuming is what the House did to take the 5 million from A&R for their IIJ match and reduce it by $5 million so they can spend it elsewhere. The administration is concerned about doing that, and so this is something that I would recommend we look at, because our whole goal is to have the money there to meet, so we could draw down those federal dollars. And, here's another $1.4 million. And then, on tax modernization. And then central garage, and the 1.7, that's the one we're gonna change, so, in the T-bill. All right, we'll move on. So this is, we're not gonna do this, just to let you know.
Not gonna do it?
Transportation, the 1.7, they're not taking it out of,
It's a wise choice.
and the reason we're not is because the T-bill is going to propose something that should make Senator McDonald very happy, and that is where we are proposing.
Put a stoplight in March.
No, we're going to deal with the freeloaders who are not paying the gas tax, but
Oh.
are not contributing to.
How much is that $89 gonna raise?
It'll be close to close to $1 million first year, which is 3/4 of a year, and after the second year, 1.7. Which is a significant amount. And it would be directed toward investments in getting our charging network.
It's a good shot, it's a good,
Do people pay a tax on charging?
No,
no, but they're gonna pay for their charging stations now. At least we'll get them to pay.
this
for their
is a
charging.
surcharge when they register.
Yeah, but what about the hybrids that are?
They're paying half,
44.50,
44.50. We're picking them both
got
up.
that 50 cents.
On top.
Yeah, it's a surcharge, a road user surcharge.
If you wanna use the roads.
But if you're
But it's-
all.
but it's only in-state.
It's $90.
What
It's
what
90.
we have?
It's equivalent, it's equivalent to the registration.
89.
Yes.
All right, so, let's go to D101, B1.
So in, the next document that I handed out, this shows direct apps. So you'll see three house differences, an increase from the cannabis regulation fund to the general fund,
Why do they call
by 2 million.
Why do they call that?
Application to the general fund.
Direct application.
So the question in that is, because sales have been pretty good, does that reflect, the total amount that's there?
Well, which one?
In the cannabis,
Oh, it's 12 million.
is 12 million reflective of,
I don't know, I think the, board felt that they could free up 2 million, but to know how much that leaves them for other expenditures, I don't know.
This is also FY 25, so I'm not for the full extent that there might be more at the close of FY 24.
12 million is the, 10 million is the estimate. This isn't
So,
really,
yeah,
this is after expense.
the House received information that this could go up by
the
2 million.
only, the real question for me in this is, how did they come up with the 12? And how would it relate to how we would make it?
Well, we had 10, it means that it gives us money to build the budget. And so we got testimony that they said that they felt that they could increase the direct app from 10 to 12, the 2 million. And that came from the board itself. So,
So
I don't know.
that was part of my question. If the board said 12, but I'm fine with that. If they picked a number based
I think
upon.
the board said 2, governor said 10, and I assume that governor's 10 is based on,
What the board said at that time, and then they came
Yeah,
back
I
and
think
said,
the later we've gotten the year, the more revenue we've seen.
well, I guess, are you saying we should check with them to see if they could give up more than 2?
Yes.
Well, we can check. Why not raise them?
Why not see if that's the right
Federal
number?
receipts, sports wagering. I don't know how that's coming in. I bet that looks good.
Yeah, especially after.
Maybe after, I don't know whether there's any reason to adjust that or not.
During the course.
that's sports.
And tobacco settlement. Tobacco fund. That's the 3 million for the child welfare information system. Is that what that is doing?
I believe so.
Okay. And that's not tobacco fund. That was the original funding source. I go through this all the time. We set aside two reserves. One was to help with mental health workforce, and the other was to improve our child welfare system, our CHINs working. And so this, there's still money left that we had set aside from this tobacco settlement, a large amount of money. And what the House is proposing to do is, fund and get the, agency to find another 3 million to actually, get a new child welfare information system, which they badly needed. So, it seems like if we want to improve our system, a lot of what will drive that improvement is data and better understanding about, the families and the cases. So, that's just a little background where that 3 million came from. So I want people to know this isn't, recent decision. It is not taking money out of the tobacco fund, as you might understand it. This is money that got appropriated, 5-6 years ago, Dick? I mean, so, and we've been spending it down. It's been used to, fund the master, which, and some other initiatives, I think home visiting. So, this,
Still 2 million.
it's still more than 2 million. I think it was 4. It was 7 minus 3, it leaves still about 4 million in the fund.
So
I asked you something. Maybe it is.
I think it was, we had 7 in the fund and this 3 reduced it to 4. AG settlements, that's just what the governor recommend, unclaimed property and DFR direct app, which we always appreciate their contribution.
And I would note for the committee, on the child welfare IT system that, the chair mentioned. So there are 2 other pieces of language in the bill that correspond to that. There's a B1100 $3 million appropriation that the chair referred to. And then there is language in section E 300.5, that says if there's more money to close out 3 million for that as well. To bring it to 6, which I think is,
The estimated cost.
Yes. The next document I'll pass out is E102. This is the reversion section.
Hundred versions and reversions, huh? As opposed to 100 visions and revisions. Okay.
Oh, you're in. That's fine. You're. I got the
Oh, okay. Legislature, ledge council, joint fiscal.
So, the first several items here up through 5, remain unchanged from the Gov Rec.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, go ahead.
How do we have reversions for inflation? We haven't got, when we just changed the budget.
We're reverting
Money.
from something that's already been appropriated to something else.
So it's like
And,
X, but
yeah,
like carry.
are these reversions from, is this where they're going to or where they're coming from?
So these are reverting from the accounts indicated to the general fund.
So if we.
Kind of like carry,
Yeah.
but instead of carrying forward into their money, it's reverting.
So you either had a project from the legislature or you.
But the
Yeah.
2753rd reversion is a fund that we have in place every year. So can you explain the 806? I mean, that would be contribution that we would, we're having a hard time with the reversions here. The reversions are from already an appropriated source.
Yeah.
So did we make a payment, will we, on the 2753rd, we 8.06?
So I believe, I'm looking for fiscal office, I believe when the 27th payroll payment and the 53rd Medicaid payment were due the last time around. An appropriation was made to the Secretary of Administration to allocate those funds as needed. They allocated everything and they had money, $8 million left over after they made those allocations. It's based on estimates for Medicaid as payroll. So that money is sitting in a one-time appropriation to be used for that purpose. The agency of administration.
So what are we doing, reverting it and then reappropriating?
Yeah, so and you'll recall the $12 million pension plus payment that the administration had originally said they would pay for with carry forward. The two appropriations they were going to utilize to pay for that pension plus payment were the remaining 2753rd reserve appropriation from a couple of years ago, and this next one, the transitional retirement appropriation. You add those two together, you get to the $12 million for the.
So they just made it more transparent.
Yep.
But I was just wondering, so how we had money in that reserve?
Yes, and the description is probably a little misleading. It's not really the reserve, it's the appropriation to spend the money out of the reserve.
And it
that
wasn't
happened
as
in
much
20
that we needed.
There's
Yeah.
less than
Again, I'm guessing, I'm gonna speculate, it was during COVID. And there was enough other money floating around that maybe they didn't need to fully utilize.
So, and the COVID contingency, that's $1 million.
Yeah, so this is, I spoke to it when we were going through the FY 2024 piece, but in the FY 24 budget. Section B 1100 L3, I think, there is $10 million for the Agency of Human Services for COVID contingent.
And they said,
Yeah.
$1 million.
The House took, and then they took the 560,000 for FY 24 for the non-emergency medical transfer, and then they took another $1 million in FY 25 and allocated it to the Bridges to Health program and the urgent care.
Which we
The
may
mental health
replace with
urgent care.
just, if we can do just an across the board increase. Because we had testimony that the federal funding was gonna go another year, and I think different agencies might not have had the program, and then the question becomes one, who got something, who didn't. In a level funded appropriation. Any other questions on this? Well, I'm glad you're back.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a quick turnaround.
so should we got through. Just looking at the
everything.
sections,
Great,
um,
got Grady,
There's still,
Plus, operate fund.
that's fair.
which the what?
Threw me under the bus on the armory fund. I probably named that.
Not Burlington, and it's not a fund.
We have.
it is Burlington, it's not in Burlington, it's not the fund, it's military.
It is the military. Well, it's a special
That's what
fund.
Grayson did.
Yeah.
And
It's a capital, it's a special capital fund that they have, the moving the general fund into that fund.
we know.
I feel.
I know it isn't in Burlington, but it's on the interstate.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
Burlington.
No, it is Burlington, but it's not
Oh, the,
Burlington.
yeah, oh, yeah, the fund name.
The language is right, the name is wrong. It works out,
Oh,
it happened already.
Oh, I think we should spend a lot more time on that.
Yeah, the bygones armory.
Just double check.
All right. So,
Town clerk's office and make sure.
Emily, you left us and then we went to Grady, shoot Fraser. It's 4:00, and I think Senator Burrows, we have a 4:00.
Yes, we do.
Not 405.
there was, do you want to do the very last reversion?
What is the
In
last?
section 102, there is a $5 million reversion from an appropriation made from the ARPA funds. That was for the weatherization program that DCF doesn't believe they will utilize, so there is a reversion of the $5 million, and then you'll see in the correction
Yes, we know.
services section, the swap, but that's where that other half of that transaction lives.
And we're thinking about adding some language, and Doug was gonna help us just to give assurance that these swaps in no way are they're one time and they should not be an ongoing adjustment to the base. Cause that's the concern we got from the DOC folk and the language that they've got to do that, in a variety of places across state government, gonna create a lot of concern if the departments or agencies think that they're getting hit with an ongoing base reduction as opposed to a one-time, swapping of funds. So that's what we have with him. Other questions then? All right, well, we'll just keep plugging away. And, hopefully we have got, everybody's, we keep adding, Senator Sears just added 2 million to the one time. With the fact that the courts are not collecting the money, to support their IT system.
Is that because they aren't collecting their money or they aren't, putting out enough fines to bring in?
Combination. People that can't pay, but mostly I think it's only fines. Not stopping people.
Oh, no, that's true. The fines are down.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I noticed
Cause
that
they had a
more
fee on fire.
more-
They have a fee on.
enforcement on the road,
So many of the
They-
surcharges on,
and there was,
Well, maybe that might help, but
well, I don't think considering the traffic jam, probably people were speeding too much.
no, yeah, there was some
today.
I saw one last night.
So,
They
okay,
were driving under the posted speed limit, so they should get a ticket for that.
well, that's a new novel way of generating revenue. With that said, I'm going to, adjourn the committee for today. We'll go on to another meeting, and then if we have another
Oh,
meeting.
okay.
Fourth Thursday.